This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard but didn't. Southern Poverty Law Center going after those critical of the government. Starbucks, the safest coffee house in town. Obama extends the Patriot Act for another year. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News. Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, March 14th, 2010. The Southern Poverty Law Center aims to lump those critical of the government with neo-Nazis and other hate groups. The SPLC claims their mission is to fight hate, bigotry, and seek justice for the most vulnerable in our society. Truly noble aspirations, but they have their own agenda. And often it is to silence those critical of the government. The SPLC was founded in 1971 by Morris Deese and Joseph J. Levin Jr. as a civil rights law firm. Deese worked for Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy in the 1970s. Mr. Levin also worked for the Carter administration. It is safe to say that the founders and the SPLC agenda skews to the left side of the political spectrum. They methodically deploy a consistent strategy. Undermine those critical of the government by associating them with terms like neo-Nazi or hate group or militia. If SPLC was just another political blog or magazine, then no problem. But no, they aggressively disseminate their publications and reports to law enforcement and the media. They attempt to control information. Case in point was the MIAC report in February 2009. This report, created by a Missouri law enforcement fusion center, linked libertarians and third-party advocates to extremists and terrorists. Although not directly involved in the report, the Fusion Center based findings on those from the Southern Poverty Law Center. The state of Missouri later rescinded the report and apologized. Another example was just this past week on Dylan Ratigan's show. The SPLC just issued a report on what they called hate rage, the increase in right-wing extremism. Take a look at some of the lowlights.
Now, at its worst, anger also fuels radical ideas, conspiracy theories. Married with ignorance, it'll yield racism, and in many cases, violence. Or the number of so-called anti-government patriot groups who view the government as their enemy grew by a whopping 244% last year. They have ammunition for their beliefs, but what they do with their beliefs is destructive, not constructive. We're talking about groups like the Oath Keepers, the Constitution Party, and the John Birch Society. So if nothing else, the Tea Party is guilty of being a willing acceptor of those who would have violent or racist ideals, even if the Tea Party at its heart does not harbor those ideals. First, let's bring in Mark Potok, Director of the Intelligence Project for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Mark, have you ever seen numbers like this?
Not in my tenure doing this work. I've been doing this for close to 15 years, and I haven't seen anything like this.
What confuses me about the Tea Party is the Tea Party's willingness to accept the wingnuts, as you put it, without shaming them or defining more crisply what the Tea Party's agenda is relative to those who just want to kill black people, for instance.
So that's our fault that they're nuts?
No. Do you accept racists and Nazis in the Tea Party? Do you have any intention of answering any of my questions?
Racism.
Let me ask you a question, Mark. Because I don't want to continue with this. You're wasting valuable oxygen. Can we please cut off this man's microphone? He has no interest in answering my questions. Mark, a pleasure.
Okay, see you.
Actually, not really a pleasure. It was offensive. You're offensive. Your treatment of my show as a vehicle to spread your propaganda, ignore my questions, offensive, and an indication of what is wrong with the dialogue in this country, period. Not to mention a group that would accept Nazis and racists.
Ratigan breathlessly and uncritically propagated the SPLC report findings. At one point, he called Oath Keepers, the Constitution Party, and the John Birch Society hate groups and destructive to the country. Ratigan did have Mark Williams on, a Tea Party organizer, to represent the alternative view. Ratigan took 40 seconds to formulate his first question, which was the journalistic equivalent of, "Do you still beat your wife?" Ratigan went on to dominate the 3 minutes that Mark Williams was on the air, not allowing Williams any opportunity to express a view on the SPLC report. Ratigan, who breathlessly ranted throughout the segment, ironically accused Williams of wasting valuable oxygen. The Southern Poverty Law Center will label you as a hate group if you believe border laws should be enforced. They're afraid to come right out and say it, but they also feel Christians are a hate group for their biblical view of homosexuality. There are several Christian groups listed as hate groups on their website because they politically oppose the homosexual agenda. Be on the lookout for national media and law enforcement labeling those critical of the government as a hate group. You'll often find that their source was likely the Southern Poverty Law Center. This week, Wyoming and South Dakota joined Montana, Utah, and Tennessee to declare that firearms manufactured and sold within their states are exempt from federal laws. South Dakota Governor Mike Rounds has signed into law his state's version of a Firearms Freedom Act that was first launched in Montana. Wyoming took the unusual step of specifying criminal penalties, including both fines and jail time for federal agents attempting to enforce federal laws related to personal firearms in the cowboy state. Gary Marbett of the Montana Shooting Sports Association, who spearheaded the Montana law, said, "The issue is not only about guns, but about states' rights and the constant overreaching by federal agencies in Washington to impose their requirements on in-state activities." There are 21 other states with similar pending legislation. Starbucks sent gun control advocates into a tizzy when they stated that they will respect local laws when it comes to customers' choice to open carry a firearm into their coffee houses. And the usual suspects shook their fingers at the policy. The Brady campaign started a petition to request Starbucks reverse their decision. Both Pete's Coffee and California Pizza Kitchen caved in to gun ban advocates. They no longer allow customers to carry firearms into their establishments contrary to local laws. Of course, as private companies, they have the right to set policy on their property. You also have the individual choice where you buy your coffee. Citigroup announced that effective April 1st, 2010, they reserve the right to require 7 days advance notice before permitting a withdrawal from all checking accounts. Initially, there was confusion as to whether this policy was in effect for Texas or nationwide. In a later release, Citi clarified that the new policy is in effect nationwide and was required by federal regulation. When you make a deposit, whether it's a checking account or safety deposit box, you are giving custody to the bank. As we have learned in the past, it is up to them if they return it to you. Caltech graduate student Virgil Griffith built a search tool that traces IP addresses of those who make Wikipedia changes. The IP address is the ID of the computer from which the changes were made. This is important because what were previously anonymous Wikipedia editors are now brought out into the light of day. On November 17, 2005, an anonymous Wikipedia user deleted 15 paragraphs from an article on e-voting machine vendor Diebold, deleting an entire section critical of the company's machines. In this case, the changes came from an IP address reserved for the corporate offices of Diebold itself. And it is far from an isolated case. Evidence shows that the CIA, congressional staff, and large companies such as Walmart have their fingers all over Wikipedia. Next time you're on Wikipedia, you may want to see who's editing the information you're reading. The Patriot Act was set to expire on February 28th, but thanks to President Obama, it has been extended another year. Over the past 9 years since it went into effect, the FBI gained private information about American citizens from internet providers, telecommunications companies, and healthcare providers, all without warrants. They even tracked you at libraries. The Patriot Act extended another year, and no one seemed to notice. This week, 93% of Icelandic voters rejected a plan that would pay back British and Dutch governments for money they lost over the collapse of the IceSave Bank in 2008. The plan would have required each Icelander to pay the equivalent of $140 a month for 8 years. These foreign investors chased 15% interest rates and got burned. Now they're looking for the common Icelanders to bail them out. 93% of them are not having any part of it. We would like to thank you for your continued support. Please share this channel with your friends and family. From all of us at Informed Citizen News, have a great week.